touchy question. You're sitting here on 63rd and Central Park West at the New Yorker Festival, for God's sake. The red-hot epicenter of somebody's nightmare somewhere. What accounts for this horrendous polarization in which 63rd and Central Park West can barely understand rural Indiana, say, or a lot of other places that one could name? Because it is markedly deeper than 1968. It's markedly deeper than everything we know about even some of the worst flashpoints in American history, certainly in the beginning in the 20th century.
Right now, there are a lot of lines being drawn about who gets to be American. And it speaks to a bigger crisis of belonging in this country. My candidacy, in many ways, is a response to that crisis of belonging. Now, a lot of it is what's been perpetrated by right-wing politics and certainly by the current president, right? So clearly telling people they don't belong based on gender identity or sexual orientation or religion or country of origin or race, gender, you name it. But there are other dimensions of the search for belonging that I think are really causing a level of pain that deserves to be acknowledged in rural America, in places like the industrial Midwest. And that yearning for belonging can either be the thing that divides us, because we find belonging in whatever tribe we align with and then just get belonging out of fighting others, which is how a lot of fighting works in the world. Or we tap into something deeper, which is the fact that it's not that different, that the anxiety of a sheet metal worker in St. Joe County, Indiana, who used to rely on a certain role in the economy.
But if deindustrialization, for one thing, is a brutal reality, what do you say to that person? What do you say to those towns that have been hollowed out, and cities as well?
Well, here's what we're doing in South Bend. It's tough in a place like South Bend. I'm not sure if folks know this. The per capita income in our city just went above $20,000 for the first time in a long time. And so we're living.
$20,000 is per capita income in South Bend.
That's right, yeah. So we've been living this ever since the factories closed in the 60s. And what's working for us, obviously I could talk through the part about how we're creating new jobs in different industries, but equally important is that we have worked to build a sense of identity around being part of South Bend. Stuff I used to hate as a mayor because I only cared about policy stuff. I never would have thought that one of the things I'd spent a lot of time on was creating a new city flag, for example. That was exactly the kind of symbolic stuff I didn't care about. But we have created a sense of what it means to be in our community. And the reason that's so important is that your job is not just a source of income, it is a source of community, a source of identity, and a source of purpose. Now, if you don't have some source of those things, something ugly will fill the void. Something ugly like substance use, or something ugly like white nationalism. But there are other ways to build up that sense of belonging. And some of them might sound conservative, because they might have to do with community or faith, but I think are very healthy. And some of them can also be national. It's why I think national service, for example, needs to be high on the agenda, and why I'm making it a big part of my campaign. Anything that gives us a sense of having something in common. It's why my climate plan, of course I think that the technical dimensions of my climate plan are the best, but all of them are very good technically. The really important thing about my climate plan is that it recruits folks like farmers to be part of the solution. Because if we're all part of this national project, then we stand up taller and we have this kind of glue that brings us together and a different kind of propulsion. I led the field in proposing democratic reforms that to this day some candidates supposedly on my left haven't embraced. I also am a candidate who believes that Medicare for all is not as attractive as Medicare for all who want it, that gives people the choice. So one of those you might say puts me on the center, another one puts me further out. There's a position on criminal justice reform that not only I and fellow Democrats hold, but some conservatives and libertarians are starting to embrace. And so we're living through a real scrambling of some of these ideological labels, and I think that's a healthy thing.
Can I jump in on Medicare for all versus Medicare for all who want it? It seems axiomatic that if you go with Medicare for all who want it, you cannot have Medicare for all, that the math will not work out. And I totally understand the point that you have, 150 million people that are on private insurance now, and likely, certainly in the beginning, they're not going to want to leap out of it into the unknown. That's the dilemma, certainly, that Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders faces in the argument. The dilemma that you face, it seems to me, is that Medicare for all who want it can come off to some audiences as a fancy way of having your cake and eat it too, when you can't.
Why not?
Because if enough people don't want to be involved in Medicare for all, will the funding be there? Will it be adequate to have Medicare for those who want it?
Yeah, I mean, this is how public alternatives work. They create a public alternative that the private sector is then forced to compete with. We talk about this like healthcare is the only place we've ever contemplated a public alternative, but actually, things like internet service providers, my fellow mayors have been doing it, and it's remarkable what happens in the private sector when you have a public challenge. The way I come at it, I guess, is just rooted in a certain humility about what's going to happen, because one of two things will happen. Either there really is no private option that's as good as the public one we're going to create, which means everybody migrates to it, and pretty soon it's Medicare for all, or some private plans are still better, in which case we're going to be really glad we didn't command the American people to abandon them whether they wanted to or not. And I'm neutral on which one of those outcomes happens, because it's not, the core principle for me is not whether or not the government is your health insurance provider. The core principle for me is that you get covered one way or the other. That's what Medicare for all who want it entails.
You've got a debate coming up. I thought you did extremely well at that CNN forum. It was a kind of a remarkable thing to watch, maybe even an unimaginable event X years ago. You have a debate coming up, and you're in the midst of what I've always thought is a pretty cockeyed process. The way we get a Democratic nominee through the route of Iowa, New Hampshire, and all these steps and steak fries and all the rest. Some of it's beautiful, some of it's inspiring.
The steak fry really is a beautiful thing, though.
The deep-fried donut is excellent, too. But how do you break through? Because your polling is where it is. It's a crowded field. Some of it's dynamic, some of it's not. How do you break through? What's the scenario?
So in terms of breaking through, I've advanced past roughly 20 of my competitors, which is not bad for somebody nobody had heard of in January. There are admittedly a few more big hills to climb. Although I would also add that where I am right now in the mix is roughly where the eventual nominee almost always has been in the year before the vote, if history is any guide. And I think where this is going to shake out is if you really do want the candidate with the most years of Washington experience, the most familiar face possible, then you've got your choice. And if you want the most ideologically, conventionally left candidate you can get, then you've got your choice. Most Democrats I talk to are looking for something else. And that's where I come in.